Hey, it's Luke without a darts. We are checking out the Unicorn here today. This is your tips and tricks and assembly guide / manual for the Unicorn Tactical Edition. This blaster unfortunately didn't come with an updated user manual, so that's caused some confusion because there are differences with the rail and assembly. So we're gonna go through all of that today. So right off the bat, I'm gonna go ahead and throw on some eye protection because anytime I'm working with lubricant or working on blaster with sharp pieces and such, I always wanna wear eye protection. These are all the parts you should see out of your box, minus these tools here. You'll also see me interchangeably use power driver, but you certainly don't need that. First, I wanted to go through a few quality check issues that we did have with the blaster. We are now checking every single unit before it goes out, so you'll see a QC sticker on yours. If you have any issues whatsoever, please reach out. We'll always take care of you. That's what we're here for, and warranty is a big part of service here at Out of Darts. The first is these two little flashing bits here, and this is where plastic actually went into the mold, and those both need to be clipped. And I'm doing this sort of upside down so the parts fall down, but you're just clipping these off. Clipping it off nice and flush. After you've got it like that, you can take an X-Acto knife and just trim that off so it's nice and clean. And this normally would have been done by the team at the factory, but it was missed on the second run of production. Kind of a fun little story here, or not so fun. As many of you know, there was a big delay in getting these here. The entire first shipment, the whole container was lost and we never figured out where it went. So all of this had to be reproduced. The next quality issue that we have seen is the Unicorn silkscreen here. This actual painting on the body was misaligned in the jig on a number of the blasters, about half of them. So we are selling those at a discount. They're $15 cheaper. So for those that aren't too concerned about that, a little minor cosmetic thing, you'll see that, but yours should be, if you purchased a regular one, should look normal, and basically the color should be inside the grooves of the lettering. The next thing we noticed is that some of these were not as tight as they should be, so you should make sure that that's snug. You don't need to over tighten or anything, but you want to check for that. And then you want to look for alignment. This should be nice and straight and sticking straight out the back of this. A few of these were damaged in shipping. Not a large number, but about 5%. So we're getting replacements for those, and we'll make sure those are taken care of. The next thing as far as QC, if you want to look through, is just to make sure that your RAM is fully threaded, and you can basically just kind of grab that and see if it spins at all. This one's nice and tight, so it shouldn't be a problem, but that should be nice and snug into the RAM base, which is the O-ring portion that's here. The last thing that we do to QC check is to pull the plunger tube and just look that it's nice and clean inside. We check and inspect all of the parts to make sure that there's no visible defects or any shavings or machining bits that are left. And then what we've been doing before all these go out is we actually have been cleaning and lubricating them fully just to be sure, since we've taken all the time to open everything up. One thing we also want to look for is a few of the plunger heads had some excess glue from the RAM base, and you want to make sure there's not a ton of excess glue or anything here. This looks nice and clean, so this is a good one. That's pretty much it for quality control. Other than that, if you ever run into anything, please reach out to us directly. First, we're going to assemble our stock, and you're going to take 4 of your short screws that have blue thread locker on them. That's because these parts are going into the aluminum, and we're simply going to drive them in place with the smaller of the 2 Allen keys that are included in the set. I'm going to use my drill because I want to. These don't need to be overly tight, but they should be snug. Next, we're going to install our lower rail. Now this is symmetrical, so it goes either direction. It doesn't matter which, but this is going to thread into the plastic on the bottom of your slide. You just want to make sure that they go in all the way, but don't get over cranked. Next, we're going to take our grip and we're going to slide that on. Now you have a little bit of leeway as far as where this sits. It could sit all the way back or all the way forward. I'm going to put it just slightly forward of center. And we're going to take our 2 longest screws, slide them in, and that will lock it front to back. And then sort of while supporting or holding those, you're going to flip it around and drop in your 2 hex nuts. And then you're going to kind of do the reverse by holding the hex nuts and flipping that back around. And then you can take your larger Allen key here and tighten that up snugly. Next, we're going to put our rail insert or our top slide rail. Now, it's worth noting that the original Unicorn and sold separately is available a rail that just sits put. This plate has little tabs, and these just pop into place here. I'm not going to pop this one into place right now, but you can just stick one side in and you kind of wedge the tabs in. You can use a small screwdriver or just your fingernail. So once you've got one side in like that, you can just push the other side down as well. Now, I'm not going to install that because I want to show you how to install the other parts, but if that was installed, then that would open compatibility for this rail. And the rail faces this way with the wedged portion at the back, and you're going to use the longer screw in the front and one of the shortest screws in the back. They've actually shortened this screw so that I believe it no longer can touch the plunger tube. Now, when you're screwing into this plastic here, you may find that you've got a little bit of extra flashing These have brass inserts in the base of them, so if you do find you're having any issues attaching, you can simply clean it out with a little bit of a drill bit or even just an X-Acto knife. Just cut it open enough, and then you can force that screw to go inside there. But otherwise, if you're not doing that version, you don't need to mess with it. Now, I want to install the slide rail because that's what actually by default comes here. So we're going to take our two approximately 3/4 inch screws here, or 5/8 maybe. We'll pre-insert them, and they're going to attach to the top slide here. So as I mentioned, since I am going to put one into this hole, I'm just going to open up that hole just a hair to make sure that I can get that screw in easily. Then we're going to take this little brass coupler, this little slide, which helps keep that slide straight, and we're going to insert that through, and we're going to thread that into the hole. And then you want to check that it slides freely, and we're looking good there, so that is great. Now we're going to take our rear spring cap and we're going to thread that in. Nothing fancy here, just thread it in until it's tight. Don't want that to be loose. You don't need to over tighten, it is just aluminum. So next we can drop this spring into the spring guide back there. Now we can take our plunger. Yours will come fully lubricated, so you shouldn't have to lubricate it right after. But if for some reason it looks dry, we'd recommend adding a liberal amount of lubricant. Now we're just going to put that into the plunger tube and connect the two halves together. At this point, you'll feel that you're going to add a little bit of pre-compression, so you will want to have your pins ready to go. The large pin goes in the back here, and if you want, you can actually pre-start that one, because essentially now you're just going to push the two bodies together, hold them while shoving the pin all the way in. You may find those are a little bit tight. They will wear a little looser over time. I've never had a problem with one coming apart or anything. And we can now reattach our stock. So to attach the stock, you've got your stock release down here in the bottom. Just gonna push on that and slide the stock to your desired level. Now, one thing that's confused plenty of people is this optional lower stock, and this is basically to set your blaster up like a paintball marker. This can thread into a literal bottle, like a plastic bottle, I believe a 2-liter soda bottle or similar. There are a couple different sizes that will literally thread in there, and you can use that as a stock, as kind of a different option. But to install that, you essentially just slide that up in here and add this little wedge in the middle. Now you could leave that if you wanted that there. Otherwise, I typically just don't use it. As much as I do like the level and where this holds the blaster, I just prefer having the regular stock. The idea here though is that it brings the blaster sightline right up to your eye level, much more like a paintball marker, so it'll feel a little different as far as play and handling. If you're coming from Speedsoft or paintball, you might find this the way you want to go. But personally for me, I'm going to go with the regular grip, regular stock. Next, we're going to install our little fiber optic sight bits. So in your little spare parts bag where you've got spare O-rings, there are going to be 3 little pieces of this fiber optic thing. For this front fiber optic piece, we're going to install it in the front here, and you're actually going to push it from the front. Now, if you have issues getting this in, it can help to open up the end of the hole with an X-Acto knife, but hopefully you shouldn't need to. And then once you've got this in, you should give it a little bit of a pinch. And it does look like, based on the tolerances, that this part is definitely supposed to come in through the front. And then we'll check the back. Now, the back sights are actually made out of metal, so they might be a little bit different tolerance, but I'm going to assume that they too are coming in, that the part should come in from the back, and it looks like those fit very well. Give that a little pinch to make sure it's all the way in, and then we'll repeat for the second one here. Fiber optics are, very kind of a very basic thing, but they do add a nice look and feel to the blaster when you're actually using it. Lastly, I just wanted to note, if you are installing any sort of SCAR or PCAR, they are highly recommended and will dramatically, even this inexpensive $7 or $8 injection molded PCAR from Worker will make this much more accurate. It's worth noting that all barrels vary a little bit, and so do the injection molds on all of these parts. If you have any issues fitting this and it's not tight enough, this one looks to be plenty tight. It should not move around too much, but you should be able to get it off if you want it off of there. All you need to do is just apply a tiny bit of clear packing tape or Scotch tape to the tip and use that to make up the diameter difference. And there we have it. That's a fully assembled unicorn. That is the basic manual to put the things together. We do recommend narrow tip darts, so don't shoot anything with a wider dart than one that looks like this. There are many brands that are like this, but you're going to want to keep that in mind. Always load with the darts pointing forward on the arrow, like the magazine says. This blaster is compatible with all Talon magazines. However, if you want to use our Coda magazines, there is a mod guide to modify the dart gate in here so that it fits properly. But with that, we can go ahead and actually fire off some shots. This blaster does hit very hard, so always use eye protection. Anybody you're firing at should be wearing eye protection, and it is a beast of a performer right out of the box. I'm looking forward to getting it on the field soon. Now that we've got the Tactical Unicorn assembled, I'm going to go ahead and go over tips and tricks and general maintenance. The first thing to keep in mind is that dart age and selection does impact performance greatly. If you pick up dirtier darts or worn darts or darts that are damaged, stepped on, anything like that, you're going to see more gunk and dirt inside your blaster, and you're going to see poorer performance overall. So when you're out there, you're picking up darts on the field, if you're playing in muddier conditions or dirty conditions where there's sand and grit and grime, I like to blow off the darts and just try to make sure I'm putting the cleanest darts in here as possible. That said, you can't always avoid it. I mean, a lot of times I'm picking up whatever's on the field, and that's where maintenance comes into play. So the first thing is you're always going to want to make sure that your mags are looking clean. These can be cleaned out relatively easily. I'll actually go ahead and just show you how to do that too. Not all mags are as easy to clean as these ones are, but these are very easy because of these nice caps that come off so easily. Do watch that you don't spit the base plate out when you throw that away. But this can be cleaned out with just soapy water and left to dry, and then you can simply reassemble, put everything back together. Definitely wouldn't want to leave these wet, so if you do that, make sure you're cleaning it up after. And that, you'll see that little key will line up and lock that in place. The same pretty much goes with any mag. The idea is that you want as little dirt and grime and grease and other things inside there. Every dart you pick up goes in the mag, it transfers dirt, debris into the magazine, which then ultimately gets into the blaster. And since the blaster has lubricant all over it on the inside as far as the internals, the plunger tube, and a bit on the ram, you will attract dirt and grime over time. First thing we're going to do here is we're just going to open up the blaster. Now we know we just built this one, so this one's not going to have any dirt or grime, but the main things we're going to look at cleaning is the plunger, so we're going to take that out. Next we're going to take out the plunger tube. I like to use a towel to grab it. It's just, you kind of lift up that direction and then it'll pull right out. But I usually just kind of grab it, give it a little wiggle, and it'll come right out. Now when it comes to lubrication, we recommend the slug slime, which is very thin lubricant that we sell on the site. That is what the tolerances of these metal parts in this blaster were made for. So we would recommend that's what you use to relubricate. I generally relubricate my blasters every month or two. That might be a couple days of play, or it might be 6 months if I've only played a couple days of play during that time. Where you play will really impact how often you need to open up your blaster. If you're playing outside in the dirt, you are going to want to do it on a regular basis. You essentially have 4 places to look for lubrication and dirt and grime. You've got the ram and the area here, so the entire ram, the O-rings, you want to check the condition of the O-rings, look for nicks and cuts, anything like that. You've got the ram base here, which has O-ring on the end for padding, which is only there to take the absorption of this slamming forward when it fires. And then you've got the sealing O-ring, which is this side, the main O-ring. Then you've got the actual plunger itself with the spring guide connected in the middle. While you've got this open, you can check that that is indeed put together and connected fully. And then you've got the plunger tube itself, which is part of the same assembly. But the process is pretty simple. I like to take either an old rag, or more frequently I've been using these shop towels, and you're basically going to get every bit of grime and dust and dirt out of here that you can, and you're removing all existing lubricant. I like to take off the O-ring, just kind of set that aside. So we're going to clean up every little nook and cranny that contains any oil or grease. I'll set that aside. I usually wipe the outside of the plunger tube. The outside has nothing to do with the blaster performance, and then I'll shove a piece of towel down through. Might do that twice just to get that nice, it should be nice and clean inside. Now, if you need to remove take the whole blaster, you actually will have to remove the side parts and pull these screws. It's pretty self-explanatory once you get in there, but generally you can clean the plunger pad here, and you can clean the O-ring by wiping kind of sideways and over. And as you go through, you'll get more and more of that lubricant out of there. If you do want to get at this O-ring entirely, I would recommend taking the entire assembly off. It's the side screws and the grip need to come off. But generally for normal maintenance, I can rotate this O-ring and get the majority of any dust, dirt, grime kind of cleaned out. And that O-ring is rotating. I can see it rotating as I go along here. And similar, the ram itself can be wiped down, any dirt and grime in there. And then finally inside the dart gate, which is right in there, I like to kind of roll a piece of paper towel up, and we can send that through. Now, if you've really gotten it dirty, you might even need to clean your barrel out, and that requires a little bit, something long. We're looking at a tool to actually do that in-house or for customers. But that's looking pretty good. This is one of those times where you can look down the barrel. You know, we've got no spray in here, so I'm actually gonna glance down the barrel. Since it's a relatively new blaster, it's nice and clean. I'm gonna leave it at that. Any O-rings you've actually removed too, you should go ahead and completely clean up. It'll usually be pretty obvious if you've got an actual issue that's affecting your air seal and performance. and it's usually dust, dirt, grime, that sort of thing. And you want to check the condition of the O-ring, look closely that there's no nicks or cuts, and if there are, you're going to want to replace it. So we'll go ahead and reinstall that O-ring on our plunger head, and then we're going to lubricate everything up. So I'm going to start with this guy here, and to get the lubricant all the way around, I like to just drop it on and use a finger to kind of rotate that O-ring around. You can put a tiny bit on the front, the base, the padding, and then you can take your plunger tube itself and add a little ring inside there. Lastly, we're going to take our plunger head and add a pretty liberal amount. The only downside to adding too much is that it can get elsewhere in your blaster and attract more dirt than you want. So you want quite a bit of lubricant, but not too much. Then we can go ahead and reinstall our plunger tube. If your ram needs a little bit of lubricant or you're finding you're having issues sealing there, first check the condition of the O-ring, but then we do recommend the thicker super lube for these portions because it will stay put a little better. That said, you can use either. Just know that the other stuff tends to rub around. And you don't want too much on here because this interfaces with darts, so it's going to pull some of that into the barrel. And at that point, we are essentially ready to put the blaster back together. It's always a little weird, this last part, so you're just basically sliding the two parts together until that plunger tube fits. You can pinch here to hold that together. Back pin always seems to be easier for me first, and then the front pin. Clean and lubricate is really the most common maintenance we see on all Springer blasters. And in case you're wondering, there's no blaster that doesn't require this. These blasters are operating kind of maxed out as far as their performance, the maximum amount of air going through the plunger tube at the right barrel length. Because of that, they don't have the very loose tolerances of a toy blaster, so you'll see a larger performance dip when there is something dirty or out of place. Next, we're going to swap a spring. Now, you've basically already done it if you've assembled your blaster, but you're going to pull these two pins while holding onto this. Carefully grab both parts. You want to make sure you're not primed. And then you're simply going to pull the spring out, take your new spring, and reinsert it in the same way, and do the opposite and put it all back together. Again, pinching between these two parts here with that left hand, and putting your pins back in place. Now, it is worth mentioning this blaster essentially comes with the highest power spring that we would ever recommend you put in the blaster. We do not recommend upgrading beyond that. It's already shooting pretty much maxed out as far as we can tell for the plunger volume and barrel length, but we will be offering springs that tune this blaster down. If you're really trying to get this blaster down, the other way to do so is by swapping your plunger tube with a slotted plunger tube. Essentially, that's a plunger tube with a hole halfway down that intentionally creates an air leak, which reduces the FPS. It can be a great option if you're trying to play with this blaster with kids. The nice thing about this blaster, it is so quick to get in and out. It's easy to get in and diagnose any issues or swap a spring or clean it out. I just love it for that because it saves a lot of time when you're out on the field. Next, I'm going to show you how to swap a barrel. Now, fortunately with a tactical unicorn, it already comes with the threaded barrel base. So it makes it very easy. You're essentially just going to unthread the barrel, and then we have a variety of barrels that can fit this. The Kuryaka barrels are all optional ones that can fit. Threaded barrels, I think, are definitely the future of where things are going in the hobby. We love the threaded ones because it allows you to fine-tune your FPS and your performance and accuracy, all that on the field really easily. This part is completely optional. We sell a thrust bearing, which is an upgraded part, and a thrust bearing is just this rotational bearing that can take a load in the directions my fingers are pointing. To install this, you're going to want to remove this whole thing from your blaster, your rear spring cap, and you're going to actually want to kind of stack this up like this and then build this vertically like so. If you just drop the bearing in there, you have a chance of it flipping over. And so you're just going to use this like this. And then when you put your spring in and you put this back together, you'll want to make sure you apply pressure and do this in a vertical format. I believe in the video you can actually see in there how it's sitting. And what that thrust bearing does is reduce any friction on the spring actually rotating in the base of the cap, and we think it helps a little bit. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any additional questions about the unicorn, leave it down in the comments, or if it's something you're actually stuck on, shoot us an email. We're always here to help, and we're always going to be creating more content like this to help make this easier for you. Thanks for watching.